The savage wolf had already broken 3 iron chains
You
before
must stay
sunrise.
strong.
By the time the
We
4th
will
chain
get through
snapped,
this.
6 of the Alpha King's strongest warriors were lying wounded across the frozen stone courtyard, their weapons scattered beneath the snow. One man was clutching his shoulder. Another had blood running down the side of his face. A third was staring at the enormous animal as though he had just discovered that everything he had ever believed about strength was wrong. And in the middle of them stood the wolf. It was black from nose to tail, so dark that the falling snow seemed to disappear against its fur. Frost clung to its shoulders. A long scar crossed the left side of its face. Its breath rolled through the cold air in thick white clouds, and its golden eyes moved slowly from one warrior to another. Nobody dared approach it. Nobody except the king. Kalen stood beneath the stone archway, watching the creature that had defeated his best soldiers. For 3 days, the wolf had refused every attempt to control it. Chains had failed. Cages had failed. Food had failed. Even the royal wolf masters had failed. The kingdom had begun calling it the savage wolf. Some believed it was cursed. Others believed it had come from the deepest mountains to punish Valedorn. But then, just as the king prepared to order the creature killed, something happened that nobody in the courtyard could explain. A young woman stepped through the servant's doorway carrying an empty wooden tray. She was barely noticed at first. Her dress was plain. Her shoes were worn. Her hands were rough from years of washing dishes in freezing water. She had never held a sword. She had never ridden into battle. She had never been taught how to command a wolf. She was simply Mara, one of the quietest servants in the entire fortress. Yet the moment the savage wolf saw her, it stopped growling. The courtyard fell silent. Mara slowly lowered the tray. The enormous wolf stared at her. Then, before the eyes of the king and every warrior present, the creature lowered its head. No one understood why, but Mara did, because she had recognized something hidden beneath those golden eyes. The wolf wasn't filled with hatred. It was terrified, and Mara knew exactly what fear could do to a living creature. She knew because she had spent most of her life surviving it. What nobody knew was that the silent waitress had just become the only person standing between the legendary wolf and death. And before this story was over, she would discover that the wolf had not been brought to the kingdom to be tamed. It had been brought there because someone desperately wanted to keep its true purpose hidden. Valedorn was a kingdom built between mountains. Its stone walls rose above dark pine forests, and beyond those forests stood the northern peaks, white and silent beneath the sky. Even during summer, snow remained trapped along their highest ridges. In winter, the mountains seemed to swallow the horizon completely. The people of Valedorn had learned to respect the wilderness. They knew which rivers froze first. They knew which forests became dangerous after sunset. They knew never to travel alone when the northern wind began howling between the trees. And they knew the stories of the wolves. Long before Kalen became king, the first rulers of Valedorn were said to have lived beside enormous mountain wolves. Not ordinary wolves. Guardian wolves. The old stories described them as protectors of villages, guides through blizzards, and companions of the first kings. Children were told that a guardian wolf could hear danger long before a human could, that it could smell a stranger beneath the wind, that it could find a lost child beneath a mountain of snow. And most importantly, that no human could command one. A guardian wolf had to choose. But stories change when people repeat them for generations. The old songs became shorter. The old rituals disappeared. The ancient sanctuaries were abandoned. And the royal court eventually remembered only one part of the legend. The wolves were powerful. So powerful, the court believed, that if one could be controlled, it could become the greatest weapon in the kingdom. King Kalen had grown up hearing those stories. His father had believed them. His grandfather had believed them. And Kalen, although more practical than either of them, had never completely forgotten them. He became king at 26. His father had died protecting the northern border from raiders, leaving Kalen a kingdom surrounded by enemies and a crown heavier than he had expected. Since then, Kalen had spent every year strengthening Valedorn. He rebuilt the northern watchtowers. He trained new soldiers. He increased the number of patrols along the mountain passes. He demanded discipline from everyone around him. Some called him cold. Others called him ruthless. But those who knew him best understood something different. Kalen was afraid. Not of death. Of failure. His father had died because the northern defenses had not been strong enough. Kalen had spent years promising himself that no one under his rule would ever suffer because he had been too weak to protect them. That belief shaped nearly every decision he made. So when hunters came down from the mountains carrying stories of an enormous black wolf, Kalen saw an opportunity. The hunters had found the creature near an abandoned stone shrine after a violent storm. The wolf had been caught in a steel trap. But when the hunters approached, it had torn the trap apart. 2 men had been thrown into the snow. 1 horse had broken free and disappeared into the forest. The wolf itself had vanished before anyone could stop it. The hunters found its blood on the snow. They followed the trail for nearly a mile. And then they saw it standing beneath the trees. Huge. Silent. Watching them. The oldest hunter had lowered his weapon. He later told everyone that the wolf had not looked angry. It had looked wounded. But nobody listened to that part. The story that reached the fortress was simpler. A savage beast had attacked hunters. So Kalen ordered it captured. 3 days later, the wolf arrived at Valedorn. The fortress had never held an animal like it. The cage had been built from thick iron bars reinforced with oak beams. For horses had been required to pull it through the outer gate. The wolf spent the first hour standing perfectly still. It did not bark. It did not howl. It did not even growl. It simply watched. The warriors had mistaken that silence for submission. They learned their mistake quickly. The first chain broke before sunset. The second broke after midnight. The third snapped just before dawn. By morning, the fortress had become a place of whispers. Mara heard all of them. She heard them while carrying bread into the dining hall. She heard them while collecting empty bowls. She heard them while washing silver cups in the kitchen. Everyone had an opinion. It killed a man. It nearly killed 3. It's cursed. It's too intelligent. It's waiting for the king. Mara listened without joining the conversation. She had learned that people often revealed more when they believed nobody was listening. At 22, Mara was already an expert at being overlooked. She had been born in a small northern village. Her father had died before she could remember him. Her mother had raised her alone. Then came the famine. The winter that followed had been so cold that the river froze almost completely. Food became expensive. Firewood became precious. People stopped leaving their homes. Mara's mother became sick. There had been no healer. No medicine. No money. Mara remembered sitting beside the bed while wind shook the wooden shutters. She remembered holding her mother's hand. She remembered promising that morning would come. But morning came without her mother. After that, Mara had learned how to survive. She worked. She carried water. She cleaned rooms. She washed dishes. She learned which servants were kind and which ones were cruel. And she learned that silence was often safer than truth. But there was one thing she had never learned to stop doing: caring. She fed stray cats behind the kitchen. She wrapped injured birds in cloth. She left scraps near the old hunting dogs when the kennel master wasn't watching. Once, she had spent half a night beside an injured horse because she could not bear to leave it alone in the cold. Animals never asked her where she came from. They never laughed at her clothes. They never reminded her that she was a servant. They simply accepted what she offered. Perhaps that was why the wolf frightened her less than the people around it. On the morning of the 4th chain, Mara was carrying a tray through the servants' corridor when she heard the sound. Metal. A scream. Then a roar so deep that she felt it in her chest. She stopped. The tray shook in her hands. Another crash echoed through the fortress. A servant beside her whispered, "The beast has broken another chain." Mara looked toward the courtyard. The servant grabbed her arm. "Don't go there." Mara hesitated. Then she heard something else. Not a roar. A whimper. It was almost too quiet to hear. Mara slowly pulled her arm free. She walked toward the courtyard. She saw the warriors first. Then the broken chain. Then the wolf. Its fur was covered in frost. Blood marked its muzzle. One of its front paws was bleeding. Mara looked at the creature's eyes. The wolf looked back, and she saw something nobody else seemed to notice.
Fear.
Its pupils were wide. Its ears were flattened. Its breathing was too fast. It kept glancing toward the western gate where the warriors were standing. Every time someone moved, its body tightened. Mara understood. It was trapped, not just by the cage, by the fear of what would happen next. She stepped forward. A warrior raised his sword. Stop. Mara froze. The wolf's head snapped toward him. Its lips lifted. Mara whispered, "Put it down." The warrior stared at her. What? The sword. Garan stepped forward. He was the largest man in the courtyard. Broad shoulders, gray eyes, a scar across his chin. He had served Kaelin's father before Kaelin inherited the crown, and there were very few warriors in Valedorn who could challenge him. His armor was dented from the earlier fight. His pride was worse. "You should return to the kitchen." Mara lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry." "Then go." She turned. But before she could take another step, she heard the wolf growl. Not at her. At Garan. She looked back. The creature's body was trembling. Mara slowly set her tray on the snow. Garen's expression changed. "Girl." She ignored him. She took one step toward the cage. The wolf backed away. Mara stopped. She took another step backward. The wolf stopped moving. A strange silence settled over the courtyard. Mara lowered herself slowly until she was sitting in the snow. She did not reach through the bars. She did not speak. She simply sat. Minutes passed. The warriors watched. King Kaelin watched. Even the horses had gone still. The wolf's breathing gradually slowed. Its head lowered. Mara remained where she was. Eventually, the creature walked toward the bars. One step, then another. Its nose reached the iron. Mara could see the small cuts around its muzzle. She could see dried blood between its claws. She could see how exhausted it was. "You don't have to fight me," she whispered. The wolf stared at her. Mara swallowed. "I won't hurt you." She knew it probably couldn't understand the words, but perhaps it could understand the sound. The wolf lowered its head. For the first time, Mara saw its eyes clearly. There was no hatred there, only exhaustion. She remained beside the cage until the sun disappeared behind the mountains. That evening, King Kaelin called her to the great hall. Mara stood beneath the towering stone pillars while the king sat at the far end of the table. Garan stood beside him. Several council members were present. Mara kept her hands folded. Kaelin studied her. "What did you see?" Mara hesitated. "The wolf." "I know what you saw."
His voice was calm.
"What did you understand?" Mara looked at the floor. "It is afraid." One of the councilmen laughed. "Afraid?" Mara said nothing. The councilman leaned forward. "It has injured 7 trained soldiers." "It is still afraid," Mara said quietly. The laughter stopped. Kaelin's eyes remained on her. Why? Mara thought of the way the wolf had watched the western gate. Because every time someone approaches, they bring something that can hurt it. Garan folded his arms. "And what would you suggest we bring?" Mara looked toward him. "Nothing." The hall became silent. Garen's mouth tightened. Kaelin leaned back. "You believe it should simply be left alone?" Mara nodded. "If you want it to trust you. And if we need it to serve the kingdom?" Mara looked at him. "Then it must choose to." The king stared at her for several seconds. Nobody in the room spoke. Finally, Kaelin dismissed her. Mara returned to the kitchens. She thought the matter was finished. It wasn't. The next morning, Garan ordered another attempt. This time they built a reinforced enclosure inside the courtyard. 6 warriors entered. 2 carried shields. 2 carried heavy nets. The remaining 2 carried hooked poles. Mara heard the commotion while serving breakfast. Then came the screaming. She dropped the cup in her hand. It shattered on the floor. She ran outside. The wolf had broken through the first line. A warrior flew across the snow. Another lost his shield. Garan shouted orders. Kaelin stood on the balcony. Mara looked at the wolf. Its eyes were wild. Then she noticed something. The creature kept looking toward the king. Not because it wanted to attack him. Because everyone was moving around him. The wolf had nowhere to go. Mara stepped into the courtyard. Garand shouted her name. She kept walking. The wolf turned. Their eyes met. Mara stopped. She saw its chest rising and falling. She saw blood on its paw. She saw the terror beneath its fury. She lowered her head. The wolf's ears lifted slightly. Mara placed her empty hands in front of her. Nothing. No weapon.
No chain.
No food. Just empty hands. The wolf took a step toward her. Then another. The warriors froze. Mara did not move. The wolf came close enough that she could hear its breathing. It lowered its head. Its nose stopped inches from her fingers. Mara slowly opened her palm. The wolf smelled it. Then it stepped backward. It did not attack. The entire courtyard seemed to breathe again. Kalen descended from the balcony. He approached slowly. Everyone leave. Garand turned. My king. Leave. The warriors withdrew. Mara remained. The wolf watched Kalen carefully. The king stopped several yards away. For the first time, he looked at the creature without seeing a weapon.
He looked at Mara.
You were right. Mara said nothing. Kalen's eyes returned to the wolf. Perhaps we have been asking the wrong question. Mara looked at him. What question? Kalen answered quietly. Not how to tame it. He paused. How to understand it. That night, Mara returned to the cage. She brought meat. The wolf waited. She placed it near the bars. This time, the animal approached immediately. It ate. Then it looked at her. Mara smiled faintly. You're hungry. The wolf's ears moved.
Mara sat down.
She stayed there until the moon rose. And when the fortress finally became quiet, the wolf curled up near the bars where she sat. For the first time since its capture, it slept. Mara watched it breathe. She thought the worst had passed. She was wrong. Near midnight, she noticed blood on the snow. Mara leaned closer. The wolf had been pressing its paw beneath the cage. Something was trapped there. She reached carefully between the bars. Her fingers touched a piece of cloth. She pulled it free.
It was blue. Old. Torn.
And stitched into one corner was a symbol made from silver thread. Mara's breath caught. She knew that symbol. She had seen it once before. Years ago. On a small wooden pendant that belonged to her mother. She stared at the cloth while the wolf watched her. Then, far beyond the fortress walls, a wolf howled from the mountains. Ash answered. And Mara realized that the creature had never been trying to escape the cage simply because it wanted freedom.
It had been trying to reach something. Someone.
Something it had lost. And somehow, her own family might have been connected to it. Mara did not sleep that night. She sat on the narrow bed in the little room beneath the kitchen, holding the torn blue cloth between both hands. The candle beside her had burned nearly to the end. Wax had spilled across the wooden table. Outside, snow brushed against the shutters. She turned the cloth over again. The silver symbol was small, almost hidden. 3 curved lines surrounding a narrow crescent. She had seen it before. She was certain. But memory was a strange thing. Sometimes it arrived clearly. Sometimes it came like a shape beneath deep water. Mara closed her eyes. She remembered her mother's hands. Thin fingers. A wooden pendant. Silver paint worn almost completely away. Her mother had once told her never to lose it. Then, during the famine, the pendant had disappeared. Mara had assumed it was sold for food. She had never asked. Now she wondered whether her mother had hidden something from her. The next morning, Mara began searching. Not openly. That would have been impossible. A servant asking questions about ancient symbols would attract attention. So she waited until the castle was busy. Then she entered the old records room. It was a narrow chamber behind the Western Library. Dust covered the shelves. Old ledgers leaned against one another. Some books had not been opened in decades. Mara searched through histories of Valedorn. Nothing. Then she searched books about the northern mountains. Still nothing. Finally, she found a damaged volume with a faded leather cover. There was no title. She opened it. The first pages were missing. The remaining drawings showed enormous wolves beside human figures. Mara's hands trembled. She turned another page. There was the symbol. The same silver crescent. Underneath it were words written in an old form of the kingdom's language. She read slowly. Guardian. Not servant. Not weapon.
Guardian.
Mara continued. The ancient wolves were said to choose humans who possessed patience, courage, and a willingness to protect without demanding obedience. Mara stopped. She read the sentence again. Then she looked at the drawing. A woman stood beside a black wolf. Around her neck hung a silver pendant. Mara's throat tightened. The face in the drawing was not hers, but something about the posture felt familiar. She closed the book. Footsteps sounded outside. Mara quickly returned it to the shelf. Garen entered. He saw her. What are you doing? Cleaning. He looked around at the dust. With an empty cloth. Mara lowered her eyes. Garen stepped closer. You have been spending too much time near that animal. Mara said nothing. It will make you careless. She looked at him. It is already hurt. Garen's expression hardened. So are my men. Mara didn't answer. Garen leaned closer. You think kindness makes you special?
No.
Then what do you think? Mara glanced toward the door. I think pain makes creatures dangerous. Garen stared at her. For a moment, something almost like understanding appeared in his eyes. Then it disappeared. Stay away from the wolf. He walked out. Mara waited until his footsteps faded. Then she looked at the old book. She knew she had found something, but she did not yet know what. That afternoon, Kalen came to the cage. He came alone. No guards. No weapons. Mara was already sitting nearby. The wolf watched him. Kalen stopped several feet away. Does it have a name? Mara shook her head.
No.
Kalen looked at the animal. It should. Mara looked at the gray streaks beneath its black fur. Ash. Kalen glanced at her. Why ash? Because when the light catches its fur, there are gray streaks underneath. Kalen considered the name. Ash. The wolf lifted its head. Mara smiled. It likes it. Kalen raised an eyebrow. Does it? Mara nodded. It listened. For the first time, the king almost smiled. Then his expression changed. Can you help me? Mara looked at him. With Ash? Yes. She hesitated. Kalen's voice softened. I need to know whether it can be trusted. Mara looked through the bars. Ash isn't the one who needs to be trusted. Kalen understood. Then help me earn its trust. Mara nodded. The next morning, she entered the cage. For the first time, she carried a bowl of warm broth and pieces of roasted meat. The warriors watched from outside. Garen stood with his arms folded. Mara sat on the ground. Ash remained at the far side. Its eyes never left her. Mara placed the bowl down. Then she waited. Minutes passed. The broth cooled. Snow began falling. Ash did not move. Mara did not either. Eventually, her fingers became numb. She rubbed them together. Ash watched. Mara looked toward the bars. You don't have to come. The wolf's ears moved. She looked down. I'll wait. Another hour passed. Then Ash stood. One paw at a time. It crossed the enclosure. Mara did not move. The wolf approached the bowl. It smelled the broth. Then it looked at Mara. Mara slowly lowered her gaze. Ash drank. Outside the cage, Garen's expression changed. He had watched men spend hours trying to force the wolf to obey. Mara had done nothing, and somehow that had worked. But trust did not come in one moment. It came in pieces. A bowl of food, a quiet voice, a hand left open, a night spent sitting beside the cage. Ash began sleeping when Mara was nearby. It stopped pressing against the bars. It stopped growling whenever footsteps approached. Then, one afternoon, Mara noticed the scar on its shoulder. She touched it gently. Ash flinched. Mara stopped immediately. Sorry. The wolf watched her. Slowly, it lowered its head. Mara touched the scar again. Beneath the fur, she felt a hard ridge. Metal. She moved the fur aside. A fragment of iron was buried beneath the skin. Mara's face tightened. Someone had trapped this animal. Not long ago. And they had left part of the trap inside it. Kalen saw it when Mara brought the matter to him. Can it be removed? Yes. But it will hurt. Kalen looked toward Ash. Can it survive? Mara nodded. But it has to trust us. Kaelin gave orders for the best healer in the fortress to be brought. The healer approached the cage. Ash immediately backed away. Mara entered. She sat beside the animal. The healer worked slowly. Ash trembled. Mara kept one hand near its neck. Stay with me. The wolf's breathing grew faster. The healer pulled the metal. Ash jerked. Mara's fingers tightened against its fur.
Easy.
The metal came free. Blood followed. Ash collapsed against her. For a moment, Mara feared it had stopped breathing. Then its chest moved.
Once. Twice.
Mara closed her eyes. A tear escaped before she could stop it. Kaelin saw it. He said nothing, but something inside him shifted. He had watched soldiers die. He had ordered battles. He had stood beside men who bled out on frozen ground. He had learned to control his face. Yet watching a servant girl hold a wounded wolf as though its life mattered as much as a king's, he could not look away. That evening, Kaelin found Mara sitting beside Ash again. Why do you care so much? Mara looked at him. I don't know. That's not true. She looked toward the mountains. My mother used to say that frightened things become dangerous when nobody listens. Kaelin was silent. What happened to her? Mara looked down. She died. He did not ask more, perhaps because he understood that some griefs should not be forced open. For several days, the fortress changed. Ash became calmer. Mara became a familiar presence. And Kaelin began visiting the courtyard without announcing himself. Sometimes he watched from a distance. Sometimes he sat near Mara. Neither spoke much. There was comfort in the silence. But the peace could not last. One morning, a messenger arrived from the north. 3 villages had been attacked. Buildings burned. Food stores destroyed. Several people missing. The council demanded action. Garin argued that Ash should be sent with the soldiers. It can track them. Kaelin shook his head. It's not a weapon. It's the strongest tracker in the kingdom. Mara stood near the doorway. She said nothing, but she noticed something strange. One of the messenger's weapons had been brought into the hall. A knife. On its handle was the same silver symbol. Mara stared. Later, she found Garan near the training yard. Where did the raiders come from? He looked at her. The north. Did anyone survive? Some. Did they say who attacked them? Garan frowned.
No.
Mara looked at the knife. The symbol. What about it? I've seen it before. Garen's expression changed. Where? Mara hesitated. Near Ash. That evening, Lord Varric came to the king. Varric was a handsome man in his late 40s, always dressed in dark clothing, always calm. He spoke softly. He smiled often. And he never raised his voice. That made him more dangerous than men who shouted. My king, he said, the northern attacks may not be ordinary raids. Kaelin looked at him. What do you mean? The guardian wolves. Mara, standing near the doorway, felt her stomach tighten. Varric continued. The old stories say they protect the mountains. Kaelin's eyes narrowed. And, if someone wished to destabilize the north, they could use the legend to frighten the villages. Mara studied him. There was something wrong with his words. Not the words themselves. The certainty behind them. Varric knew too much. Later that night, Mara returned to Ash. The wolf was restless. It paced, stopped, listened, then looked toward the northern mountains. A long howl rose from its chest. Mara felt the sound in her bones. Ash howled again. Mara whispered, Someone is out there. The wolf turned toward her. Its golden eyes seemed almost desperate. Mara understood. It wasn't calling for enemies. It was calling for family. The next morning, Kaelin found Mara waiting outside his chamber. She held the torn blue cloth. I know where it wants to go. Kaelin looked at the cloth. Where? The mountains. He was silent. Mara continued. I think Ash is trying to find someone. Kaelin looked toward the northern windows. Then he made a decision that would change everything. We leave tonight. Mara looked at him. Who goes? Me. He paused. Garan. Then he looked at Ash. And you. Mara's heart tightened. She knew they were walking into danger. But somewhere beyond the mountains, a wounded wolf was waiting for them. And for the first time in years, Mara felt that her life was moving toward something instead of simply surviving what came next. They left Valedorn before sunrise. The fortress still slept beneath a blanket of snow when the great western gate opened with a groan, its iron hinges protesting against the cold. Beyond the walls, the road disappeared into a white wilderness, winding between black pine trees and climbing toward mountains whose peaks were hidden behind clouds. Kalen rode at the front. Garin followed several paces behind him. Mara rode between them on a small brown horse borrowed from the royal stables, her hands wrapped around the reins so tightly that her knuckles had turned pale. Ash did not ride. The enormous wolf moved freely through the snow. Sometimes it walked beside Mara's horse. Sometimes it disappeared between the trees. And sometimes it stopped completely. Those were the moments Mara had begun to fear. Because whenever Ash stopped, everyone stopped. The wolf would lift its head. Its ears would turn. Its nose would rise toward the wind. It listened to things no human could hear. Kalen had begun trusting those pauses. Garan had not. "How long are we going to let the wolf lead us?" the warrior finally asked. Kalen did not turn. "Until it stops." Garan frowned. "We don't even know where we're going." Mara looked toward the trees. "Ash knows." Garan glanced at her. "You seem very certain." Mara said nothing. She had learned that arguing with Garan accomplished little. Ash moved ahead. The snow reached nearly to his belly. Yet the wolf seemed unaffected by it. Every few minutes he looked back. Not at Kalen. At Mara. She could not explain why that made her feel safer. Perhaps because, for the first time in her life, something was checking to make sure she was still there. The road gradually disappeared. The group entered the forest. The trees stood so close together that their branches formed a dark ceiling overhead. Snow fell from the needles whenever the wind shook them, dropping in soft clouds over their shoulders. Mara heard the distant crack of ice. A raven called somewhere above them. Then silence returned. They traveled for hours. Around midday, they reached an abandoned watchtower. Half of it had collapsed. The old stone walls were black with age, and the wooden roof had disappeared entirely. Ash stopped outside. He stared toward the tower. Mara climbed down from her horse. "What is it?" Ash did not move. Kalen dismounted. He approached carefully. On the snow near the tower were footprints. Human footprints. Fresh. Garan crouched beside them. 3 men. Kalen looked at him. "How long?" "Less than a day." Mara's stomach tightened. Ash walked toward the tracks. Then he stopped. His nose touched the snow. He growled. Not loudly. Almost like a warning meant only for those close enough to hear. Kalen's hand moved toward his sword. Garan did the same. Mara looked around. The forest had become strangely quiet. No birds. No wind. Nothing. Then Ash suddenly sprinted into the trees. Garan started after him. Kalen raised his hand. "Wait." They listened. A distant crash echoed through the forest. Then a shout. Kalen mounted again. "Move." They followed Ash. The trees opened suddenly onto a steep ravine. A young scout was hanging from the edge. His fingers were slipping. Below him, jagged rocks waited. Garan jumped from his horse. He reached for the boy, but the snow beneath his boots shifted. He stopped. Ash moved first. The wolf dropped onto its stomach and crawled toward the edge. The scout grabbed its foreleg. For a moment nothing moved. Then Ash pulled. Garan grabbed the scout's arm. Together, they dragged him onto solid ground. The boy collapsed into the snow, breathing hard. Mara rushed toward him. "Are you hurt?" He shook his head. I thought I was dead." Garan looked at Ash. The wolf was already standing. It glanced back once. Then it walked away. Garan stared after it. That animal knew. Mara nodded. Yes. Garan looked at her. Something in his expression had changed. Not trust. Not yet. But doubt. They continued. Near evening, Ash led them toward a frozen stream. Mara noticed the ice looked strange. It was darker in the center. She raised her hand. Wait. Kalen stopped. Mara dismounted. She crouched beside the stream. There was a faint smell in the air. Bitter. Metallic. She remembered something from the kitchens. Poisons. Don't drink this water. Garan looked at her.
Why?
She pointed. Look at the snow. Several dead birds lay near the bank. Kaelin's face hardened. Someone had poisoned the stream. Garan looked toward the trees. We're being watched. Ash gave a low growl. They made camp farther uphill. That night, they sat around a small fire. The flames struggled against the wind. Mara wrapped herself in her cloak. Kaelin sat across from her. For several minutes, neither spoke. Then he asked, Are you afraid? Mara looked into the fire. Yes. Kaelin nodded. So am I. She looked up. The king's face was illuminated by firelight. For the first time, he did not look like a king. He looked tired, human. Mara asked quietly, What are you afraid of? Kaelin stared into the flames. Failing people who trust me. Mara looked at him. He continued, My father died in the north. She knew the story. Everyone did. But nobody had ever heard Kaelin speak about it. The message reached us too late, he said. The fort had already fallen. I was 16. He paused. I remember thinking that if I had been stronger, he would have lived. Mara lowered her eyes. Maybe strength wasn't the problem. Kaelin looked at her. What was? Mara watched the flames. Sometimes people die because terrible things happen. The king was silent. It was not the answer he wanted, but perhaps it was the answer he needed. Ash came closer. The wolf lay beside Mara. She placed one hand against his fur. His body was warm. Kaelin watched them. You trust him. Mara smiled faintly. He chose me first. Kaelin looked toward the mountains. Perhaps that's what I've forgotten. What? That trust has to be chosen. The wind moved through the trees. Mara looked at him. For a moment, something passed between them. Not love. Not yet. Something quieter. Understanding. Then, Ash lifted his head. His ears pointed toward the darkness. Mara felt his body tense. Kaelin stood. Garan reached for his sword. A branch snapped somewhere beyond the fire. Everyone froze. Ash disappeared into the darkness. Minutes passed. Then he returned. There was blood on his muzzle. Mara's heart jumped. She stood. Are you hurt? Ash shook his head. He dropped something into the snow. A strip of leather. Attached to it was a small metal clasp. Mara picked it up. The silver symbol was carved into it. The same symbol. Again. Kaelin's expression hardened. This is no raid. Garan nodded. Someone is leading them. Mara looked toward the mountains. Someone who knows about the wolves. Nobody slept much that night. By morning, they were climbing. The forest thinned. The air became colder. The mountain path narrowed until the horses could no longer continue. They had to walk. Ash went first. Kaelin followed. Garan carried the supplies. Mara walked behind them. The higher they climbed, the more silent the world became. Then Ash stopped. He looked back. Mara knew immediately. Something was wrong. A low rumble came from his chest. Kaelin looked around. Where? Ash stared toward a ridge. Garan drew his sword. Then an arrow struck the snow beside Mara. She screamed. Another arrow struck a tree. Down. Kaelin grabbed Mara and pulled her behind a rock. Warriors appeared along the ridge. 6. Then 10. Then more. Their armor was dark. Their faces were covered. Garan looked at them. Varric. Kaelin's expression changed. The soldiers charged. Ash launched himself forward. The mountain erupted into chaos. Steel struck steel. Snow exploded beneath running feet. Mara crouched behind the rock until she heard Ash cry out. She looked up. The wolf was surrounded. A spear had cut into his side. Mara ran. Mara! Kaelin shouted after her. She ignored him. Ash turned as another soldier raised his weapon. Mara threw herself between them. The sword stopped inches above her. Ash lunged. The soldier flew backward. Kaelin reached Mara. Are you hurt? She shook her head. Then she saw Ash. Blood was spreading across his black fur. Her face went pale. No. She ran to him. The wolf staggered. Mara caught his head. Stay with me. Ash's golden eyes found hers. Behind them, Garan was fighting 3 soldiers. Kalen drove another attacker backward. Then one of the masked men shouted, "Burn the shrine." Mara looked toward the ridge. Beyond it stood ancient stone ruins. The shrine, the same place where Ash had been captured. Kalen heard the order.
His face changed.
Why would they destroy it? Mara looked at the silver symbol. Then she understood. They're hiding something. The battle intensified. Garan knocked one attacker into the snow. Kalen fought toward the shrine. Mara stayed beside Ash. Then the wolf suddenly lifted his head. He stared beyond the ruins. Something was there. A narrow stone doorway hidden beneath vines and snow. Ash moved toward it despite his injury. Mara followed. Inside was a passage. Ancient.
Dark.
Carved into the walls were wolves.
Hundreds of them.
And beside them were humans wearing silver pendants. Mara touched one of the carvings. Her fingers trembled. The woman carved into the stone wore the same pendant Mara's mother had once owned. She stepped backward. Kalen saw her face. "What is it?" Mara whispered. "My mother." He stared. "What?" "My mother knew this place." Ash walked deeper into the passage. Mara followed. At the end was a stone chamber. A table stood against the wall. On it lay a leather-bound record. Mara opened it. The first page contained a drawing of a black wolf. Beside it stood a woman, and beneath them were the words, "The Guardian chooses. The Guardian protects. The Guardian cannot be owned." Mara looked at Ash. Then she understood why the warriors had failed. They had never been trying to tame a savage wolf. They had been trying to force a guardian to become a weapon. Kalen read the page over her shoulder. His face tightened. Then another page caught Mara's attention.
A map.
It showed a hidden valley beyond the northern ridge. And beneath the map were 3 words. "The Last Den." Ash gave a low sound. Mara looked at him. "You know this place." The wolf stared toward the mountains. They followed the map. The passage eventually opened onto a narrow mountain ledge. Beyond it lay a valley hidden between enormous cliffs. Snow covered everything. But beneath the snow were tracks. Wolf tracks. Dozens of them. Mara smiled. "Ash." The wolf moved forward. Then stopped. His ears lowered. He smelled the ground.
Blood.
Fresh blood. Mara's smile disappeared. They entered the valley. The tracks surrounded a large stone den. But there was no movement. No howling. No wolves. No pups. Nothing. Ash walked toward the entrance.
He stopped.
His head lowered. A broken piece of fur lay in the snow. Mara picked it up. Then she saw the small bloodstains leading deeper into the den. Her heart sank. Kalen looked around. Garan. The warrior understood. They drew their weapons. Ash entered the darkness. Mara followed. And from somewhere deep inside the mountain came the faintest sound. A tiny whimper. Then another. Mara's eyes widened.
Pups. Alive.
But before she could move toward them, a shadow passed across the entrance. Someone was standing outside. And the voice that followed was calm. "Take the wolf alive." Mara turned. Varric's soldiers had found them. The first thing Mara noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful silence of snow falling through the trees. This was different. It was the silence of a place that had been abandoned too quickly. Ash stood at the entrance of the cave, his body rigid, his nose pressed toward the darkness. The faint whimper came again. Mara stepped forward. Then she saw it. A small paw, white fur, a trembling nose. One of the wolf pups was trapped beneath a fallen stone. Mara dropped to her knees. Oh no. The pup tried to move. It couldn't. Mara pushed at the rock. Nothing. Kalen joined her. Together they shifted it. The pup crawled free. It was tiny. Its fur was gray and white. Its body shook from cold. Ash immediately moved toward it. The enormous wolf lowered his head. The pup pressed against his chest. Mara's eyes filled with tears. Then another whimper came. And another. They searched deeper. 5 pups. All injured. All starving. One had a wound across its back. Another could barely stand. Mara removed her cloak. She wrapped the smallest pup inside it. Kaelin looked at her. You'll freeze. Mara shook her head. They're colder. He took off his own outer cloak and placed it around her shoulders. Mara looked up. You'll freeze. Kaelin gave the faintest smile. I've survived worse. Garan stood at the cave entrance. He was watching Ash. The warrior who once wanted to chain the wolf now looked almost ashamed. We need shelter. Mara nodded, but before they could move, Ash growled. Everyone froze. Footsteps. Outside. Varric's men. The soldiers had surrounded the valley. Kaelin looked toward Garan. How many? At least 20. Mara's heart sank. The pups could not run. Ash could not fight all of them while injured, and the cave had only one entrance. Then Mara noticed something carved into the stone behind the pups. Another silver symbol. She touched it. A section of stone moved. A hidden passage opened. Garan stared. How did you know? I didn't. Mara looked at Ash. He did. The wolf entered. They followed. The passage descended beneath the mountain. Behind them, soldiers entered the cave. But the passage closed before they could see where the group had gone. For nearly an hour, they walked underground. The pups cried softly. Mara carried one. Another followed Ash. The smallest remained beneath Kaelin's cloak. At last, the passage opened into a sheltered meadow. Trees surrounded it. A frozen waterfall stood at one end. There was enough shelter for the pups. Enough water. Enough food if they could hunt. Mara knelt. We can keep them here. Kaelin nodded. We need to find the rest of the pack. Ash lifted his head. Then he walked away. Mara followed. They found signs everywhere. Broken traps.
Blood.
Pieces of fur. Old bones. And finally, a wooden cage hidden beneath the trees. It was empty, but its door was bent outward. Mara touched the wood. They took them. Kaelin's face hardened. Varric. A voice answered from behind them. Yes. They turned. Varric stood at the edge of the trees. He had not brought many soldiers. Only 5.
But he did not need many.
He held a silver pendant in his hand. Mara's breath caught. Her mother's pendant. Varric smiled. You should have stayed in the castle. Kaelin stepped forward. You betrayed me. Varric laughed softly.
No.
He looked at the mountains. I simply understood something you never did. Kaelin's hand moved toward a sword. Varric continued. People do not need freedom. They need someone strong enough to control what frightens them. His eyes moved toward Ash. That wolf belongs to whoever can make it obey. Mara stepped between them.
No.
Varric looked at her. You. His smile became cruel. A kitchen servant. Mara held his gaze. Yes. The word surprised even her. Varric raised his hand. The soldiers moved. Ash stepped forward. Kaelin drew his sword. Garan moved beside him. The battle began. Steel flashed. Snow exploded beneath boots. Mara ran toward the pups. One soldier tried to stop her. Ash struck him aside. Another came from behind. Mara turned too late. Garan blocked the blade. He took the hit across his armor, then drove the soldier backward. Go! Mara ran. She gathered the pups. But then the mountain shook. A deep crack echoed through the valley. Varric had activated the explosives. The cliff above them began collapsing. Stone thundered downward. Snow filled the air. Mara screamed for Kaelin. She couldn't see him. Ash disappeared behind a wall of falling rock. One pup cried beneath her cloak. Mara ran toward the tunnel. Another stone struck the ground beside her.
She fell.
The pup nearly slipped from her arms. She held tighter.
Please.
Ash appeared through the smoke. He grabbed the edge of Mara's cloak gently with his teeth. He pulled. Together, they reached the tunnel. Behind them, the sanctuary collapsed. Kaelin emerged from the smoke. Garan followed. The mountain continued to groan. Then silence. They had survived. But Varric was gone. Mara searched for the pendant. It was missing. She looked toward the ridge. Far away, Varric stood watching them. The silver pendant hung from his hand. Then he disappeared into the storm. Mara understood. The wolf was no longer the greatest danger. The man who wanted to control it was. Varric reached Valedorn before them. By the time Mara, Kaelin, Garrand, and Ash returned through the northern forest, the kingdom had already changed. Soldiers stood at every village entrance. Market stalls were empty. Families whispered behind closed doors. The royal banners still hung from the walls. But something felt different. Fear had entered the kingdom. Varric had told everyone that King Kaelin had died in the mountains. He had told them Garrand had betrayed the crown. And he had blamed the wolves. The council believed him. The people were frightened. Mara stood beneath a tree and watched soldiers search a wagon belonging to an old farmer. A child clung to her mother's dress. The mother said nothing. Mara felt anger rise inside her. Kaelin saw it. We cannot enter the city with Ash. Mara nodded. They'll kill him. Or try. Garrand looked at the walls. Then how do we get inside? Mara looked at the fortress. For years, she had been invisible there. She knew every servant's corridor, every kitchen entrance, every staircase that nobles never used. She looked at Kaelin. I can get inside. His expression tightened. Alone? She nodded. You'll be recognized. I won't be. She removed her cloak. Underneath was her old servant's dress. Kaelin stared. Mara looked like the woman she had been before everything changed. The waitress nobody remembered. That's why it will work. She entered the fortress through the kitchens. Nobody stopped her. Nobody looked twice. She carried a basket. Inside were no weapons. Only bread. She moved through the corridors. Servants passed her. Guards ignored her. She reached Varric's chambers. The door was locked. Mara remembered a hidden passage behind the pantry. She entered. Inside Varric's room, she searched. Maps. Letters. Payments. Names. Then she found it. A letter signed by Varric. Capture the guardian wolf. Destroy the northern villages. Blame the wolves. Mara's hands shook. She took the letter. Then footsteps sounded. She turned. Varric stood in the doorway. He smiled. You really are difficult to kill. Mara stepped backward. He closed the door. You should have remained invisible. Mara said nothing. Varric approached. Where's the king? She refused to answer. He grabbed her arm. Where? Mara looked at him. You don't understand. What? You think silence means weakness. Varric smiled. It does. Mara shook her head. No. She pulled free. It means I learned to survive people like you. Varric struck her.
She fell.
But she held onto the letter.
He saw it.
His expression changed. Give me that. Mara tightened her fingers.
No.
He reached for her. Then the castle bell rang.
Once. Twice.
3 times. The doors of the great hall opened. Kaelin walked inside.
Alive.
The court froze. Varric's face went white. Kaelin's voice echoed through the chamber. Did you miss me? Chaos erupted. Guards drew swords. Garrand entered behind him. Mara escaped through the servant passage. Outside the fortress, Ash heard her. The wolf lifted his head. Then he ran. He crossed the outer fields. Soldiers shouted. Villagers screamed. Ash entered the city. But he did not attack. He found Mara. He stood between her and the soldiers. Other wolves appeared behind him.
1.
Then 3. Then 7. The crowd fell silent. Nobody moved. Mara stood beside Ash. She placed her hand against his shoulder. The wolf did not growl. It simply stood there, protecting her, protecting the people. Kaelin stepped into the courtyard. Varric tried to escape. Garrand caught him. The letter was presented before the court. The villagers testified. The weapons were shown. The truth became impossible to hide. Varric had ordered the attacks. He had captured wolves. He had burned villages. He had planned to destroy the sanctuary. Kaelin removed the royal seal from Varric's hand. You wanted power. Varric stared at him. I deserved it. Kaelin shook his head.
No.
He looked toward Ash. You wanted obedience. The king turned toward the court. And you forgot what guardians were meant to be. Varric was taken away. For the first time in days, The people began to breathe. Mara thought it was over. Then the floor shook. A deep sound rose beneath the fortress. Ash turned toward the throne. His fur stood along his back. He growled. The ancient silver symbol beneath the throne began glowing. Mara's face went pale. Something was waking beneath Valedorn. And this time, even Ash was afraid. The sound beneath the fortress grew louder. Stone trembled beneath their feet. Dust fell from the ceiling. The ancient seal beneath the throne glowed brighter. Mara stared at it. The silver light spread across the floor, like cracks through ice. Kaelin stepped toward her. What is happening? Mara looked at Ash. The wolf was staring at the throne. Then at her. The answer came from the old records. The Guardians had never simply protected the mountains. They had protected Valedorn from what lay beneath them. Centuries earlier, the first Guardians had built tunnels beneath the kingdom. They had sealed unstable passages, blocked poisonous chambers, protected the capital from collapsing mountain foundations. Varric's attempt to activate the ancient seal had damaged those barriers. Now the kingdom itself was in danger. Mara opened the old book. One sentence remained. The Guardian opens the way. The Guardian closes it. The human must choose. Mara understood. She had to go beneath the fortress. Kaelin refused to let her go alone. Garan stayed above to evacuate the people. The tunnels were narrow,
Dark.
hot in some places, freezing in others. Ash led them. Mara followed. Kaelin came behind. The deeper they went, the more unstable the stone became. Then they reached the final chamber. A massive stone mechanism stood in the center. At its heart was an empty silver socket. Mara took out the pendant. It fit perfectly. She inserted it. The chamber shook. A voice seemed to echo through the stone. Not words.
Memory.
Mara saw her mother.
She saw the old sanctuary.
She saw generations of guardians standing beside wolves. Then she understood the final secret. The ancient records had spoken of sacrifice, but they had been misunderstood. The sacrifice was not a human life. It was control. The guardians had never demanded servants. They demanded trust. Mara stepped away from the mechanism. Ash approached. Kaelin watched. What are you doing? Mara smiled, letting him choose. Ash placed his nose against the stone. Silver light filled the chamber. The mountain shook. Mara closed her eyes. Then the shaking stopped. The poisonous air cleared. The ancient barriers sealed. Above them, dawn broke over Valedorn. The guardian wolves emerged from the forest. The villagers watched in silence. Nobody attacked. Nobody raised a sword. The wolves simply stood among the trees. Ash returned to Mara. The enormous black wolf lowered its head. Mara placed both hands against his face. The same creature that had once shattered iron chains now stood quietly beneath her touch. Kaelin approached. He looked at Ash. Then Mara. I was wrong. Mara smiled.
About what?
Strength. He looked toward the wolves. I thought strength meant being able to control something. Mara looked at him. And now? Kaelin's eyes softened. Now I think it means knowing when not to. From that day forward, Valedorn changed. The old guardian traditions returned. No wolf was ever chained again. No animal was captured for royal entertainment. The northern forests became protected lands. Garan became commander of a new order whose purpose was not conquest but protection. And Mara was offered a place in the royal court. She refused. Instead, Kaelin built something else. A sanctuary. The House of Guardians. A place where injured animals could recover. Where the old wolf traditions could survive. Where no creature belonged to anyone. Mara became its first keeper. Years passed. The sanctuary grew. Children came from nearby villages. They learned how to respect the forest. They learned that wolves were not monsters. They learned that trust could not be forced. And Ash remained beside Mara. He grew older. His muzzle slowly turned silver. His steps became slower. But every evening, he still walked with her toward the edge of the forest. One autumn evening, Kaelin came to the sanctuary. He was no longer the distant king Mara had first met. There were lines around his eyes now. His hair had begun to show silver. But when Ash saw him, the old wolf lifted his head. Kaelin stopped. Ash walked forward. Mara watched. The wolf sniffed the king's hand, then rested his head against it. Kaelin smiled. I think he finally trusts me. Mara laughed softly. He chose you. Kaelin looked at her. Did he? Mara nodded.
He did.
Behind them, young guardian wolves ran through the snow. The mountains glowed beneath the setting sun. Mara looked toward the northern peaks. For years, she had believed her life had been shaped by everything she had lost. Her father, her mother,
Her home.
her place in the world. But standing there beside the wolves, she finally understood something. Those losses had not made her weak. They had taught her how to recognize pain. They had taught her patience. They had taught her that frightened creatures did not always need strength. Sometimes they needed someone willing to sit quietly beside them until the fear passed. Ash turned toward the forest. One by one, the younger wolves followed him. Mara watched them disappear between the trees. Then the first howl rose. Another answered. Then another. The sound traveled across the valley, through the pines, across the mountains, toward the villages of Valedorn. People came out of their homes to listen. No one was afraid, because they finally understood what the old stories had tried to say. The wolves had never come to serve the crown. They had come to protect a home. Mara stood beneath the fading golden light. Kaelin stood beside her. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. For the first time in her life, Mara did not feel invisible. She did not feel like a servant. She did not feel like someone waiting for the next loss. She belonged. And somewhere beyond the trees, Ash gave one final howl. The sound was deep, gentle, almost peaceful. The savage wolf who had once shattered iron chains had never been tamed. He had never needed to be. He had simply found someone who understood that love was not a chain, and loyalty was not obedience. It was a choice. And every night after that, when the guardian wolves howled beneath the northern moon, the people of Valedorn remembered the silent waitress who had walked into a cage when the kingdom's strongest warriors had failed. She had not conquered the wolf. She had listened. And, sometimes, listening was the bravest kind of strength in the world.